That oil worker suddenly noticed something was off with the well. He quickly bent down and touched the cover. The next moment, muddy fluid started seeping out through the gap. Everyone on site froze in shock. One of his co-workers rushed to call headquarters to shut the valve. But then, the mud blasted out with a sudden force. The impact threw several workers straight against the wall. Headquarters immediately activated the blowout preventer. The crew took the chance to close the valve completely. The flow finally began to slow down, but no one realized the pressure inside the pipeline hadn't been released at all. Deep under the sea, the wellhead was building up even more power. Soon, every valve began spitting out thick black oil. That's when the workers finally understood how bad this was. They were just about to get out when the well suddenly spewed oil like a cannon. The jet shot straight up through the entire rig. Headquarters hit the emergency shutoff button at the very last second. But even more oil came bursting out. The air quickly filled with flammable gas. Then, a section of the pipeline suddenly blew. Flames engulfed the entire oil field instantly. The casualties on site were devastating. The fire kept getting worse. Pressure inside the pipeline kept climbing. A second explosion could happen at any moment. Headquarters called the nearest Coast Guard for help right away, but the fastest they could arrive was in 25 minutes. Meanwhile, the trapped workers were in deadly danger. To save time, headquarters loaded all available emergency supplies onto speedboats and sent rescue teams toward the platform. But right then, the gas alarm went off again. The second explosion hit anyway. The massive pressure fed the flames even more. The drilling tower began to sway under the heat. It was standing directly over the platform where the survivors were gathered. If it came down, no one underneath would make it out alive. At a critical moment, one worker crawled toward the control room without a second thought. He gritted his teeth and pulled the lever, finally moving the tower crane into a safe position. But before he could catch his breath, another explosion ripped through the platform. A massive steel plate flew up and smashed into him, hurling him straight into the fire. Oil kept pouring out from the seabed. The flames spread like a wild beast out of control. To stop an even bigger blast, the engineer suggested cutting off all the oil pipelines. But before they could do that, they had to switch on the backup power. The power switch was deep inside the platform. Jack immediately ran toward the control room with his coworker. But as soon as they reached the tower, a smaller explosion went off nearby. They quickly beat out the flames on their clothes, pushed through the debris, and finally made it to the control room. The backup power came back online. The engineer hit the emergency stop. The massive turbine on the seabed spun rapidly, but it only lasted a few seconds before shutting down. The pressure had already peaked, triggering a third explosion instantly. At that point, the situation was beyond saving. Their only option now was to run for their lives. Meanwhile, workers on the upper deck were boarding lifeboats. By the time Jack and the others got there, the last lifeboat had already left. The blasts kept shaking the platform. Waiting for rescue was no longer an option. They had to save themselves. Luckily, they spotted one more lifeboat. But just as Jack and Anna were about to climb aboard, another disaster struck.